Welcome, fellow travelers along the highway of life.
I'm your host, Big T.
And I'm Blue Knight, and you've made it to the Midnight Truck Stop. This is where you'll hear stories from the highway by people who've experienced them firsthand. Everyone's welcome, so pull up a chair, gather around the campfire, and join us as we delve into those strange, funny, and sometimes frightening experiences that so many of us have had while traveling the highways.
If you have a story you'd like to share with us, give us a call at 909-993-3633. Or you can email us at info@themidnighttruckstop.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to our second episode, and I'm really excited. Big T?
We got a special guest for you guys tonight. A close friend of mine. I've known him for about 10 years. He will be calling in the next few minutes, and you guys are going to love his story.
Is that right? Can you tease us at all?
Well, I'm just going to say this. It took place in Big Bear, California, up in the mountains, and it's something you definitely don't see every day. That's for sure.
Okay, well, I don't know, because a lot of the audience members that are listening to this podcast, I'm sure quite a few of them have seen some strange and inexplicable things, including myself and yourself. I mean, we've seen some strange things out there on our road trips, right?
Absolutely.
Well, I'm looking forward to this guest. We will have him on in a few minutes, but before we get him on, can I talk about some of the associations that we've encountered as we've been doing this podcast?
Let's do it. Let's let our listeners know what we have in store for the future.
Right. So for all the listeners out there, first of all, thank you so much for listening to this podcast, for following us on Facebook, on Instagram. We've gotten a lot of responses. We've gotten a few emails, and we're so excited because as we're kind of venturing into this podcast and learning more and more about the trucker community, one of the things that we have found out is that there's so many different associations. I mean, everybody thinks truckers, okay, it's just one group. It's not. There's plenty of different associations that represent people within the trucking community that do so much good work. So we've reached out to people like Black Truckers United. There's a association of women truck drivers, and one that I'm really interested in is the Truckers Against Trafficking. This is an organization that we hope to have one of their representatives on in the near future to talk about the great work that they're doing in combating human trafficking and a lot of the education that they put out there for truckers, not only truckers, but law enforcement, so that they can help these victims. For all of you who are out there, you know that human trafficking is really the modern day slavery, and TAT's efforts to put a stop to it is, like I said, just some wonderful work.
Wow, that all sounded really good. Hopefully we could reach out to one of the people from TAT and get them on the show.
I hope so. And you know what? There's so many organizations out there. If any of our listeners are connected with one of those organizations that's doing great work like TAT is, give us a call. We'd love to hear your story.
With that being said, let's get right into our next caller.
I'm excited.
Our next
interviewee, our next guest.
There you go, our next guest.
Yeah, I'm excited.
All right, here we go. We're going to go ahead and get him on the line.
Yeah.
Homer Dog.
Homer.
How are you, buddy?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm good. You got you got Big T here and Blue Knight.
Blue Knight here. How are you, sir?
Good, man. How's it going?
It's going.
All right.
Cool.
So for all our listeners out here, this is one of my good friends. He goes by Homer. I've known him for about 10 years now, and he's got a very exciting story, like I said earlier, that took place up in Big Bear, California, and this dates back to the 1984. And why don't you jump in and let us know, you were traveling up to Big Bear, and go for it.
Well, actually, my daughter and my niece were with me, and we were going fishing. And we left about, I don't know, we got there about 4:30 in the morning because we get a spot by the dam. It's usually pretty crowded. And the mountains in Big Bear are a little different than most. The range runs east and west, the mountain range, instead of north and south.
Right.
So the dam is on the west side, and Baldwin Lake is on the east side, and the mountains on each side of the lake. So we were there about 4:30 to secure a good spot, and the girls were in the front seat, and I was in my van, and we were parked on a little bit of a hill, about a 45-degree angle, facing east. And the sky was kind of not light blue yet. It was still a little dark. And we were talking and just about things in general, fishing, and trying to give them some tips and what to do. And there wasn't a cloud in the sky, and I noticed on the south shore a cloud kind of coming around the mountain. And I said, "Hey, you guys see that?" And they said, yeah. And I said, "Well, that's weird. There isn't a cloud in the sky. What is that thing doing?" And it wasn't really high. Wasn't like way up there like you would normally think. And I said, "You guys see that?" And they said, "Yeah." And so we're sitting there, and the cloud proceeds to come dead east in between the mountains, and it sits there. And now I said to him, "Hey, wouldn't that be weird if that cloud started lighting up and there was a flying saucer or something in there?" And the next thing you know, that cloud started turning colors like orange. And then when it started turning colors, it started to rise a little bit. And there was other people fishing, and they were sitting there, and I could hear them talking. We had the windows down. It wasn't really cold. And so I noticed the cloud was lighting up, and I'm like, "What the heck?" I said, "That looks like a science fiction movie, like a spaceship would be inside of there."
That's crazy.
And the next thing you know, these little white lights started coming out from the bottom of the cloud.
Oh, wow.
And so one on each side of the cloud, kind of in our view, and one red one. One red light came straight down from the middle, and they kind of came down and the white lights kind of came down and did a J, and were a little higher than the cloud on each side.
So
and the red light.
So I don't mean to pause the story, but these are like individual lights that are coming from the cloud. So they're like separate entities. You can tell that they're not part of the cloud itself, right?
Correct. They're really bright white lights, not real big, fairly small. And the red light came down right from the middle of the cloud, and came down. And so I said, "Hey, do you guys see that?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, I wonder if I can get their attention."
Oh boy.
So I turned on my lights, and I started flipping the brights off and on real fast, like sort of like a Morse code type pace,
right.
That, like that.
You're a brave man.
And so all of a sudden, the light that was closest to the north shore of the lake started to drop down. And I'm like, "What?" And I kept doing it. And so the girls are going, "Dad," my daughter's like, "Dad, what are you doing?" And I'm like trying to get their attention. So the next thing you know, this thing is dropping down, and it's coming at me. And I can see, I mean, this thing's on me in no time. I can see the reflection of that light in the water of the lake. So now the girls are crying and screaming, "Turn the lights off, turn the lights off." And they jump in the back of the van, and they're crying.
I'm sure they're terrified at this point.
Yeah. And I turn the lights off in the car, and the thing backs off. It just kind of stalled for a second. I had the windows down. I couldn't hear a sound. And then that thing just backed off, and so fast, and went back up to where it was.
Wow.
And I was like, I didn't hear a sound, not even a sound. And that thing was moving really quick.
Now, how close would you say that it got to you in the truck?
100 yards.
Wow. Okay. And how old was your daughter and your niece at the time?
They were in the front seat, and they were screaming and crying until I shut the lights off, and then they dove in the back. Dad, I'm scared. Shut the lights off,
Wow.
And so...
and how old were they?
My daughter was probably 10, and my niece was probably 12 at the time.
Okay.
And so, anyway, after that little episode, I got out of the car and I walked to the side, to the edge there where the rocks start. And you can walk down the rocks to the water and fish. And I saw the people sitting down there. Now it's getting a little lighter by this time. And I asked them, I said, "Hey, did you guys see that?" And they said, "Yeah." And I go, "Do you still see the thing up there?" And they said, "Absolutely." So as the day went on, the cloud just seemed to get higher and higher in the sky, and then it finally dissipated around 9 o'clock. But if you knew where to look, you could still see the object. So every once in a while, about, I don't know, every half hour, every 45 minutes, I'd look over at those people because now we're fishing next to them. And I said, "Hey, do you guys still see that thing?" And they said, yeah, we still see it.
So it's still a light that's hanging in the sky, even at 9 in the
No,
morning?
it's not a light at this point. No,
It's just an object.
It's just an object, yeah. And it's kind of silvery. You can see the reflection of it every once in a while if you know where to look, but it's really dim. It's not like flashing, like sunlight flashing off of something. But so anyway, we got done fishing and drove back to the house, and the girls ran in the house and started telling my grandma, their grandma, "Grandma, we saw a flying saucer. We saw a spaceship." Da-da-da-da. They were going nuts. So my mom called the police department stuff, and they said it was a rocket shot off from the Air Force Base, which didn't make any sense at all. But they said they had multiple calls on that sighting.
Wow.
So, and it wasn't a rocket. I mean, it didn't move like a rocket.
Right. Didn't behave like a rocket at all from what you're describing.
Well, if it was a rocket, it's not gonna respond to you flashing the
Right.
lights at you.
And you wouldn't see you would see somewhat of a vapor trail or something, I would imagine.
Right.
So there was nothing like that whatsoever. So yeah, I believe that what I saw was a UFO.
It sure sounds like it.
Yeah, I mean that was 1984, and I talked to several people up there that had seen things like that before in the sky. Things that weren't normal. So, in my opinion, I believe I witnessed a UFO. I mean, I've never seen anything move like that.
That was going to be one of my questions to you is, have you ever experienced anything like that? Any sort of sighting that maybe you couldn't explain, or you thought, "Hey, this is a UFO," or was that the first time in your life?
First time in my life. And at that time, I was probably near 40 years old.
And your daughter and your niece, they weren't at all, they were scared, but do they recall everything that happened that day, even today?
Oh, yeah. My daughter told her boyfriend and wanted me to verify the story to her boyfriend because she thought that,
Sure.
maybe he thought she was making it up. And she said, "Dad, tell him what we saw in Big Bear," And so, and even my niece, when I see her, she's a school teacher now, and I ask her, "Hey, do you remember that, Karen? Do you remember seeing that?" And yeah, I remember.
And you weren't at all scared during this whole ordeal?
No, I wasn't. I was curious more than anything else. I wanted to see what would happen if I tried to get the attention of that object.
And you found out.
And I found out.
Yeah, right.
I mean that thing. Well, Baldwin Lake is Big Bear Lake is about 3 miles long, and Baldwin Lake is probably almost a mile.
Okay.
And I would venture to say that thing was probably, I mean, I couldn't get the exact perspective on where it was, but I'm going to say it was at least 10 miles away, at least.
Could you determine about how big it was?
The cloud or I couldn't see the object inside the cloud, but I could see when I saw the light. The light was so bright I couldn't make out the shape of the object.
Okay, so when it kind of detached itself from the cloud and came closer to you, that's when it was so bright you couldn't tell how big it was.
Well, what happened was when it came out from the cloud, it dropped down first, and it did like a J shape.
Okay.
And it came down, and then it went up, and it kind of like stayed on each side of the cloud a little higher. Well, when I started flashing the lights, it dropped down, and it dropped down to a really low level,
Right.
and about eye level with me, and and I'm going to say that thing had to be 10 miles away, and that thing was on me in like 30 seconds, if that.
Wow.
Interesting.
And did not make a sound. And then when I shut the lights off,
Yeah.
it dead stopped for a second. I mean, I don't even know if it was a second. It dead stopped, and it went backwards as fast as it came forward and straight back up to the same position.
Now you said you when your daughter got scared, you stopped. You turned off the lights, correct?
Yeah, I turned off the lights in the car. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you think if maybe you were still flashing your lights at this object, it would have came closer? You think?
I think it would have.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was approaching. It was approaching. It was approaching fast.
And I know you mentioned that your mom called the police. Did you ever reach out to anybody? Like, I know MUFON is a big organization, the Mutual UFO Network, or anybody like that, independent researchers, things like that?
I never did. I never did. Back then, it was, it was kind of, it was more like crazy, like,
Sure.
oh, you're crazy. Who's going to believe you anyway, But no, I never did. I was pretty satisfied for myself that what I saw was
UFO.
Definitely a UFO. I have never seen anything to this day move like that, except sometimes when I see pictures, on like shows of UFOs and things like that, and
Right.
objects moving. Yeah, I can identify with some of those, but that light was so bright.
And since then, you've never had any other experience?
Never seen anything similar to that ever.
Okay.
Wow.
And I thought it was maybe one of those jets they had, but no, this thing moved too quick. I mean, too quick and without a sound.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, back in 1984, I think that if you had come forward with a story like that, you probably would have been written off as, somebody having mental illness.
Yeah.
But now it's so commonplace. And I think that, even the recent UFO disclosures that the government has disclosed really is, shedding a light into this whole UFO mystery. And I think a lot of people who were once thought of as being crazy are now seen as, having something legitimate to say. They're not crazy at all. They're seeing something strange and they want to know what it is.
Right. And you wonder why so much cover up is going on. I mean, you see, accounts of, military people that have seen things, and told not to speak about it.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, to see something like that, and to experience something like that, I just don't see how anything like even if it was an experimental jet why would it be coming toward me? I would think it would have its own agenda if that's what it was supposed to do, go out on a test flight or something. I don't think it would approach me.
Right.
I don't.
Well,
so that doesn't make any
here's
sense
the big
to me.
question, though. You saw it many years ago, and you know what the kind of like the sentiment of society was, and we've obviously grown more understanding of those kinds of issues and experiences. Do you think that the public is ready for disclosure at this point?
I think there needs to be disclosure. Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I mean, it's pretty absurd to think that as big as the universe is, that we're the highest form of life and there's nothing else.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
That's pretty absurd in my opinion.
Yeah, so. I have to agree with you. I had a friend who I knew about 10 years ago, one of my coworkers, and he told me that both his stepmother and his father, or stepfather and mother, worked for the government on top secret projects in Nevada. So I assume that was Area 51, although I don't think they ever disclosed that to him. And he said that he would always talk about, aliens and UFOs with his dad when he was like a teenager to kind of pry out of him anything that he might know. But his dad never said anything. And he told me, he said, the closest my dad ever said anything about UFOs was, he said, one night we were sitting out in the backyard looking at the stars. And he looked at him and he said, son, if you were the creator and you had this vast canvas looking up at the stars, he goes, would you stop with just life on Earth? And it kind of, so it almost makes you believe like he knew something that he knew he couldn't tell, but wanted to at least instill in his son, we're not alone. And I just think that's such a wonderful story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't understand why they would want to cover it up. I don't know. The whole thing about aliens visiting Earth,
right?
Before Christ and multiple times, and the pyramids is all such a big mystery that
right
really needs to be uncovered and unfolded to the public.
I agree.
In terms of common knowledge.
I agree with you that I think we're ready. I think at this point in time, I think people have seen technology grown by leaps and bounds, and we realize there's so much out there. I think we are ready as a nation, as a one world, to understand that this is something real.
Correct. I agree 100%.
All right.
Well, Homer, I appreciate you calling in, or we calling you. And
absolutely.
Hey, man, it was a great story.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate it. So, yeah, man, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks,
I'm happy to share what I saw.
You got it. Take care, buddy.
Bye.
All right, man.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow. What do you think, Blue Knight?
I'll tell you. I mean, I know Homer. I've been to your house several times when he's there, and I've known him even outside of your house. I think he saw something out there, and I think it was a UFO. I mean, it's hard to believe that we would have something, even with all of our technology, even now, but back in 1984, that could maneuver up in the skies like that and respond to people so quickly when he flashed his lights.
Right. It almost sounded like it was targeted for him. In a way.
I don't know that I would go that far, but maybe he was just at the right place at the right time.
Could be, definitely.
And did something to draw that light's attention. One of the things I find fascinating, I think if I were to come, in close contact with a UFO, there would be a certain sense of fear in me, even though I'm obviously, I believe that there are UFOs and I'd love to experience something like that. I think there would be a side of me that was really afraid at whether or not they were friend or foe.
Right. True that. Try to stay away from them.
When Homer told that story and he was so, readily willing to flash his lights and get that thing to come towards him or to respond to him in some way, it kind of gave me a flashback of the Travis Walton story. That story back in 1975, Snowflake, Arizona, and with Travis, running out of the car towards this UFO. I just couldn't imagine doing something like that. And obviously, you can say that he paid a very significant price, being abducted and then reposited down 5 days later, and his entire life has changed as a result.
Yeah, his story, after listening and after hearing his story, that one threw me for a loop, man. That guy, I don't know. I couldn't run after something like that.
No.
I'd be running away.
Yeah, I agree. But you know what? There's a lot of accounts like that, and I'm sure there's people who have had strange, inexplicable accounts of UFOs that simply don't come forward because, like Homer, maybe the time wasn't right and they thought that they would be ridiculed.
Right.
So,
well, I think that's going to wrap up our number 2.
I think so. And this will give the audience members something to chew on until we have our next episode, which we're still lining up, but it's sure to intrigue you just as the last 2 have.
Right, absolutely.
All
well,
right.
guys, for all you listeners out there, if anybody wants to call in, I'll give you the number again. It's 909-993-3633. You could always email us at info@themidnighttruckstop.com. That's INFO at themidnighttruckstop.com. If you want to remain anonymous, absolutely, we can do that for you. Make sure you follow us on Facebook and Instagram. The Midnight Truck Stop is our Instagram and our Facebook. And until next time,
Keep the rubber on the road.
and the bugs off the windshield.